Do you ever feel just buried under information? Like you wish someone could just pull out the really key stuff?
Yeah, all the time. It's overwhelming.
Well, that's what we try to do here on the Deep Dive. Cut through that noise, find those nuggets of knowledge, and, make it interesting, maybe even a bit fun.
Hopefully.
And today we're diving into something really fascinating. It's a corner of history and folklore that, honestly, might surprise you.
I think it will.
Our main source is Sir James George Frazer's huge work, Folklore in the Old Testament. Specifically, we're digging into Part 3, Chapter 15.
Sacred Oaks and Terebinths. It's a classic piece of research.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it uncovers these incredible links between, trees, ancient religion, big biblical moments, and it kind of shakes up how we might picture the Holy Land.
Right. Most people probably imagine it quite barren, desert-like, maybe.
Exactly. But Frazer, using these old accounts, he shows this incredibly wooded landscape. And the trees weren't just, background scenery.
Not at all. They were absolutely central to spiritual life, tied into Hebrew traditions, local beliefs. The whole landscape comes alive.
Okay, so let's get into that. How did these trees become so important? Let's start with the main players, the trees themselves. Frazer singles out two, the oak and the terebinth.
Yes, these were the big ones for the ancient Hebrews, and they're still very common there today.
But they look kind of similar.
They do, enough that apparently the ancient Hebrews often mixed them up or just grouped them together. They even use similar names sometimes.
So that makes reading the Old Testament tricky, trying to figure out which tree they actually meant.
Precisely. The lines were often blurred in the texts we have.
Okay, let's focus on the oaks first. Frazer says there are mainly three types there now. The first one is the prickly evergreen oak.
Quercus pseudo-coccifera, yeah. That's the Latin, but prickly is a good description. It looks a bit like holm oak, but the leaves are spiky, almost like holly.
Locals call it Syndidium.
That's the one. It's the most common. Forms this dense, sort of scrubby brushwood on hills. Mount Carmel is covered in it.
But it doesn't get huge anymore.
Sadly, no. Centuries deforestation mean it rarely reaches its full potential size now.
Right. Then there's the second type.
The Valonia oak, Quercus aegalops. Now, this one's different. It's deciduous, like an English oak. Grows tall, thick, gnarled trunk, maybe 20, 30 feet high.
Creates more of a park-like feel.
Exactly. You find it more up north. And this is almost certainly the famous oak of Bashan the prophets mentioned.
This is a symbol of pride and strength, right?
Yes.
Oh.
And it was useful, too. Edible acorns and the acorn cups of Valonia were exported for dyeing. So sacred and practical.
Interesting. And the third oak?
Quercus infectoria. Also deciduous. Its leaves are really white underneath, and it gets these big, round, reddish-brown galls, like little marbles growing on it.
Okay, so three types of oak. But the bigger point Frazer makes, drawing on these 19th century travelers, is that the whole idea of a treeless Holy Land is just wrong.
Completely wrong, based on those accounts. These travelers, writing before the worst of the modern deforestation, they describe extensive forests. It really changes the picture.
And this is where it gets really cool. Frazer quotes William Thompson a lot. He talks about the Plain of Sharon.
Oh, yes. Home to this massive oak forest, mostly that Syndidian again. Thompson spent ages exploring it.
And he connects it to Absalom. In the Bible, getting caught by his hair in a tree during battle.
Exactly. Thompson saw those low, spreading branches of the Syndidian and thought, that explains it perfectly. You can just picture it happening.
It makes the story so much more vivid. And that forest even had a name, the Enchanted Forest of Tasso.
Apparently so, in antiquity. Gives you a sense of its mystique.
And Sharon wasn't the only place with big oak woods.
No, Thompson also mentions grand avenues of oaks elsewhere, hinting at large, wild areas. And near Banias, the source of the Jordan River, still lots of oaks contributing to that beautiful scenery.
Wasn't there one description of a truly enormous oak?
Oh, Tristram's account. Yes, near Banias at Libya. An evergreen oak, 37 feet around, branches spanning 91 yards, almost touching the ground.
91 yards, that's huge.
He said it made other famous oaks look shabby. And east of the Jordan, same story, extensive oak forests in Gilead, Batanea. One traveler called the scenery there the most charming rural scenery he'd seen in Syria, just continuous forests of evergreen oak.
And that ties back to Absalom's battle again, right? The woods of Mahanaim.
Yes, where the Bible says the wood devoured more people that day than the sword devoured.
Which sounds strange until you picture these dense, low-branched forests.
Yeah.
Easy to get lost, ambushed.
Or even just knocked off your horse. Thompson himself apparently lost his hat and turban to a low branch riding through a similar area. It makes the biblical descriptions feel very real, very grounded in that landscape.
Okay, so the land was wooded, but what about the sacred part? How are these trees venerated?
Well, Frazer points out that even today, many oaks in Palestine are treated with, let's say, superstitious reverence by locals. It's a living link to the past.
How so? What do they believe?
Often they believe the trees are inhabited by spirits, sometimes called Yan, like genies, or these figures called Benat Yaakov, the daughters of Jacob. Frazer sees this as a direct echo of ancient idolatry, spirits tied to the place.
And they bury holy people under them.
Very often, saints, prophets, and they build small domed shrines nearby, muzars or wheelies. The belief is the saint's spirit visits the tomb, keeping the spot sacred.
These little whitewashed domes you see everywhere, the mukkams.
Those are the ones, often on hilltops, under a tree. They're landmarks, sure, but Frazer argues they're basically continuations of the ancient Canaanite high places the Bible condemns.
Wow. So these aren't just graves.
No, they're seen as places where the saint stands, exerts influence. People trust them so much they'll leave tools, valuables inside, knowing no one would dare steal them.
Because they fear the saint's anger. The sheik has struck him.
Exactly that phrase, yes. The worship is simple. Take off your shoes, say certain phrases, leave little offerings like lamps if someone's sick. Maybe sacrifice a sheep as a cod, a requital, or a thank offering.
It's amazing how these ancient practices just persisted.
Yeah.
Through empires, religious changes.
It really is. Deeply rooted beliefs.
Now, mostly oaks, you said. But what about the terebinth? Was it revered too?
Less commonly than the oak, it seems, but yes, definitely. Frazer gives examples. There's the mother of rags, terebinth.
I love rags.
Yeah, where people tie strips of cloth to the branches. It can mean different things, asking for protection, trying to transfer an illness to the tree, or just marking a visit, maybe hoping for a child's health.
So direct interaction with the tree's power.
And in some places, like Moab, Frazer describes an even more direct belief.
Yeah.
The spirit, the wheelie, is the tree. It punishes people who harm it, but its leaves can bring healing. Very direct connection.
Which brings us back to that confusion oak or terebinth in the Bible. You mentioned the Hebrew words Elah and Alon?
Right, and the scholarly debate. Some argued the oak wasn't actually that common, trying to push for terebinth in translations. Part of this involves how ancient scribes, the Masoretes, added vowel points to the Hebrew consonants, potentially influencing meaning.
But Frazer pushes back.
Strongly. He says, look at the evidence from the 19th century travelers. These vast oak forests clearly show oaks were common and striking. So he concludes the revised version of the Bible, which mostly translates these words as oak, is probably right more often than not.
Okay. But this tree worship,
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't all benign spiritual connection, was it? The prophets had serious problems with it.
Oh, absolutely. A much darker side emerges. The Hebrew prophets were fierce critics. Hosea connects sacrifices under oaks and poplars and terebinths directly with religious prostitution.
Practices that horrified them.
Definitely. Ezekiel, Isaiah too, they condemn idolatry under every green tree, under every thick oak. It was clearly widespread and, in their view, deeply corrupting.
And Jeremiah. Frazer quotes a really disturbing verse.
Yes, Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 34. The blood of the souls of the innocent pour upon every oak.
Which Frazer interprets as possibly meaning child sacrifice.
It strongly suggests that, yes, that the blood of sacrificed children might have been smeared on these sacred oaks or offered to the spirits within them, a truly horrifying thought.
And this wasn't unique to Palestine.
Sadly, no. Frazer draws parallels across the globe. African groups pouring animal blood on trees, old Prussians sprinkling sacrificial blood on their sacred oak, even descriptions of druid groves washed with human blood. It seems this deep reverence for trees sometimes took incredibly grim turns.
Wow. Okay, but then there's this twist, isn't there? In earlier times, Jehovah himself seems linked to these trees.
That's the really surprising part Frazer highlights. Take Abraham. God or an angel appears to him multiple times at sacred trees. The oak or terebinth at Shechem, already an old cult site.
And famously at Mamre, the oaks or terebinths of Mamre.
Where God appears as three men, shares a meal with Abraham right there under the trees. These aren't just background details. The tree is central to the divine encounter.
And Gideon, too.
Yes. The angel of the Lord sits under an oak, brings fire from a rock to consume Gideon's offering. Again, the tree is the setting for this divine sign.
There was even an oak of the augurs, like an oracle tree.
At Shechem, yes, where priests supposedly read omens from the tree itself, a direct line to divine knowledge mediated by the tree.
And think about all the other connections. Jacob burying idols under an oak, Joshua setting up a covenant stone under one, Abimelech being crowned king there, Saul's bones buried under an oak.
It suggests this deep link between kingship, covenant, sacred moments, and the spirit or power associated with the oak. Even personal grief, like Rebecca's nurse being buried under the oak of weeping.
So many layers. But Mamre seems like the most famous of all these trees.
Arguably, yes. Because of that Abraham story, it held immense significance for centuries.
Though the debate continued, oak or terebinth.
Right. Ancient sources disagree. Josephus, the historian writing in the 1st century, calls it a huge terebinth that had supposedly been there since creation. Eusebius, centuries later, confirms it's still venerated, mentions a picture of the 3 visitors.
But the evidence leans towards terebinth originally.
Mostly, yes. Though Frazer notes a fascinating parallel with a sacred oak in Prussia, where 3 gods were worshipped, suggesting maybe a common ancient idea of a triple tree deity.
And this place was so important, Emperor Constantine built a church there.
He did in the 4th century. His letter to Eusebius survives, ordering the destruction of idols and pagan altars at Mamre and the building of a basilica.
But did that stop the old ways?
Not entirely. The historian Sizomenus describes this huge annual festival still happening there even after the church was built. People came from all over Palestine, Phoenicia, Arabia for trade, but also for worship.
A real mix of religions.
Absolutely. Jews, Christians, pagans, Greece, as they were called, each honoring the spot in their own tradition, offering wine, incense, animal.
And some strange customs.
Yeah, so Zominis mentions people camping nearby, abstaining from sex during the festival, but otherwise mixing freely. And this odd ritual of throwing offerings, coins, cakes, wine into Abraham's well nearby, making the water unusable for a time, just shows how deeply ingrained the place's sanctity was.
And then Frazer brings it to this incredibly sad conclusion.
He does. The historical irony is just brutal. Mamre, the traditional spot where Abraham received the promise of nationhood, became the very place where, after Hadrian crushed the Bar Kokhba revolt around 119 AD, vast numbers of Jewish captives were sold into slavery.
The symbolic birthplace becoming a site of national catastrophe. It's chilling.
It really grounds the whole story. And today, what's left at Mamre?
Well, Frazer notes that the tree considered the successor near Hebron is actually a massive evergreen oak, that Syndidian type again.
So the oak kind of won in the end, symbolically at least, even if the original was probably a terebinth, a living link still standing there.
So wrapping this up, this dive into Frazer's work on sacred oaks and terebinths, it just shows how deeply these ancient beliefs about nature were woven into history, religion, everything.
And how persistent they are. These trees weren't just trees, they were monuments to faith, divine encounters, dark sacrifices, the whole complex mix of human belief over centuries. Still echoing in the landscape today.
It makes you think, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Even now, we attach special meaning to places, objects, maybe even ideas. We create our own kinds of sacred groves.
We definitely do. What are our modern sacred trees? What hidden folklore, what ancient impulses are we still carrying forward without even realizing it?
Something to think about.